When you look at a World Cup knockout stage poster, it's incredibly tempting to just let the star power dictate expectations. You see the massive names, the iconic jerseys, and your brain automatically writes the script for how those 90 minutes will unfold based on pure reputation.
Right, yeah, which is always a trap.
Exactly. But before we tear up that script and show you what is actually going to happen on the pitch, we want to invite you to subscribe to the channel, to follow all our new content, and encourage us to provide more. We are really hoping for 1 million subscribers. And a massive thank you to our current subscribers. You are the foundation of our success and continuity.
Absolutely, because, the reality of knockout football is that reputation offers basically zero protection.
Yeah.
The team that dominates possession or boasts the biggest club affiliations, they often find themselves stepping right into a tactical trap, assuming they dictate the terms of engagement simply by showing up.
Which brings us perfectly to your deep dive for today. We have a massive stack of tactical previews, team announcements, betting odds, and injury reports to dissect for the round of 32 at the 2026 World Cup.
It's a huge one.
It really is. We are looking at a monumental clash, Egypt versus Australia, taking place at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. And, the overarching theme here isn't just about who advances. It is a fundamental clash of two completely different footballing philosophies. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, you have two squads that survive their respective groups through sheer willpower, right? Yet their methodologies could not be more polarized.
Right.
Australia is relying on this deeply entrenched, almost militant defensive structure, whereas Egypt is just riding this wave of historic offensive momentum.
So let's start with the Australian blueprint, because I don't think you can understand how they're going to set up in Texas without looking at the massive roster gamble they took to get here.
Oh, for sure.
And that mid-campaign crisis, that kind of forced their hand because their qualification journey started comfortably, but then they hit an absolute brick wall.
Yeah, that home defeat to Bahrain was the catalyst for literally everything we are seeing now. A shock loss like that during qualifiers, it shatters the illusion of invincibility.
Yeah, it creates total panic.
Exactly. The Federation responded with a coaching change, bringing in Tony Popovich. And to understand Australia's tactical identity today, you really have to look at Popovich's pedigree. He earned 58 caps for the national team playing as a commanding center back.
Right.
And center backs just view the entire pitch differently. They are obsessed with spatial awareness, and they have, zero tolerance for structural vulnerability.
So he comes in with this reputation as a fierce disciplinarian, like a strict headmaster whipping a chaotic classroom into shape. He demanded peak physical fitness, re-engineered their concentration levels, and basically dragged them across the finish line with a gritty 1-0 win over Japan.
Yeah, he stabilized the entire defensive unit.
But here is the massive variable in his methodology. Looking at the official squad list, Popovich selected a staggering 17 potential World Cup debutants.
Yeah, it's wild.
We are talking about guys like Christian Volpato and Tete Yengi, completely untested on this stage. Relying on 17 rookies on the biggest stage in the world, isn't that a massive physical and mental liability, especially under the pressure of knockout football?
Well, the physical and mental demands of a winner-advance match are suffocating. It's not about the physical climate, right? Because the stadium is heavily climate-controlled to negate that 38-degree Texas heat.
Right, it's air-conditioned.
Yeah. It is entirely about the cognitive overload, the noise, the stakes, the sheer speed of decision-making required. But Popovich's intense strictness is actually a psychological shield for these debutants.
Wait, how does being an incredibly strict disciplinarian shield a nervous rookie?
By removing the burden of overthinking. Popovich utilizes a highly regimented 3-4-2-1 formation. When a young player is thrust into chaos, giving them a rigid, non-negotiable set of geographical instructions on the pitch serves as cognitive offloading.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they don't have to creatively interpret the game out of possession. They just have to execute their specific positional assignment. The strict structure is this architectural safety net, preventing mental burnout by reducing the game to executable microtasks.
That completely reframes the discipline. It is not about punishing them. It is about protecting them.
Exactly.
So mechanically, how does that 3-4-2-1 formation actually function to absorb pressure? Because the numbers from their qualification and group stages are just staggering. They beat Turkey 2-0 while holding only 28% possession.
Right. The 3-4-2-1 is designed to deliberately concede the perimeter of the pitch while making the center absolutely unplayable for the opponent. The three center backs provide a numerical advantage against traditional two-striker systems. while the four midfielders act as this dense horizontal screen. They are essentially daring teams to try and thread passes through a thicket of legs in the middle.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting, the underlying metrics suggest teams are finding a way through, at least partially.
Oh, you're looking at the expected goals.
Yeah. During qualification, Australia only conceded 0.44 goals per 90 minutes. However, their expected goals against their XGA was 1.13.
Right.
Statistically, they were giving up high-quality chances that should have resulted in more than a goal a game. Are they actually a defensive wall, or have they just been incredibly lucky?
The discrepancy comes down to late-stage disruption, specifically the physical anchoring of midfielder Jackson Irvine.
Okay, how so?
Well, the XGA metric suggests opposing teams are getting to dangerous areas, sure. But Irvine's ability to read the secondary phases of an attack is crucial. He doesn't just tackle. He disrupts the shooting sequence a fraction of a second before the strike, which alters the balance of the attacker and turns high-probability shots into, rushed, off-balance efforts.
So the structure absorbs the initial wave, and then players like Irvine and wingback Jordan Boss, who tracks back relentlessly, they sweep up the debris before it becomes a clean shot on target.
Precisely.
But absorbing pressure is only half the equation. I mean, you cannot win a knockout match by just defending for 90 minutes.
No, you can't.
Right?
Which brings us to the most lethal component of Popovich's system, and really the key to their attack 20-year-old Nestori Irankunda. He is the release valve that makes the entire defensive block viable.
The Watford winger.
Yeah.
The tactical sources highlight his top recorded sprint speed at 34.5 kilometers per hour. That is elite world-class velocity.
It's terrifying for a defender. Think of Australia's defensive shape like a heavily compressed, coiled spring. They absorb kinetic energy as the opponent commits more and more players forward.
Right.
And the moment Irvine or Bruce wins back possession, they don't look to build out slowly. They immediately launch Irankunda into the vast tracts of empty space left behind by the opposing fullbacks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his sheer pace dictates the game even when he doesn't have the ball, because opposing defenders are terrified to push too high up the pitch, knowing he can punish them in transition.
So just by existing on the halfway line, he acts as this gravitational pull, forcing the opponent to keep numbers back. Before we switch gears and look at the team trying to dismantle this coiled spring, we want to pause and remind you to subscribe to the channel to follow all our new content. We are hoping for 1 million subscribers, and to everyone already subscribed, thank you. You are the foundation of our success and continuity. Now, while Australia has engineered this youth-heavy, structurally rigid system to survive without the ball, their opponents arrive with a completely different aura. Egypt is carrying the weight of history into Texas.
The contrast is just magnificent. I mean, Egypt is in the knockout stages of the World Cup for the first time in their nation's history.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. They have participated in the tournament multiple times, dating all the way back to 1934, but they've always fallen at the group stage hurdle. Until now.
And the man steering them into this uncharted territory is Hossam Hassan, their head coach, who is practically a walking monument in Egyptian football.
Oh, absolutely.
He is their all-time top scorer with 69 goals, and he actually played every minute of their 1990 World Cup campaign. The emotional momentum of having a legendary striker leading the team into their first ever knockout match is just immense. They gathered 5 points in the group stage with a win and 2 draws, scoring 5 goals, really proving their offensive firepower.
Right, they're carrying the dreams of a nation.
But emotional momentum doesn't win tactical battles. How has Hassan translated his legendary striker's mentality into his 4-2-3-1 setup?
Well, Hassan has built a system that prioritizes rapid, aggressive transition. If Australia wants to absorb, Egypt wants to isolate and destroy. In their 4-2-3-1, which fluidly shifts into a 3-4-1-2 when they have possession, the midfield double pivot is not tasked with circulating the ball endlessly.
Okay, so no tiki-taka.
No, not at all. Their primary directive is immediate recovery and diagonal distribution to the flanks to trigger one-on-one isolations.
Specifically, they are executing a heavy asymmetrical overload on the left side of the pitch with Omar Marmoush.
Yes.
He is incredibly agile and technically gifted. By flooding the left side with bodies and funneling the play through Marmoush, what does that practically achieve against a set defense?
It creates a mathematical dilemma for the defense. Yeah. The opposing right back tries to handle Marmoush alone. Marmoush's agility allows him to win that duel and penetrate the penalty area. Consequently, defenses are basically forced to shift their center backs over to double team him.
Which creates a massive vacuum on the opposite side of the pitch.
Precisely. And waiting in the shadows of that vacuum on the right flank is Mohamed Salah.
Of course.
Hassan's tactical overload on the left is essentially a decoy mechanism to manufacture vast pockets of space in the right half spaces for his captain. Salah is granted the freedom to drift centrally into those unguarded zones, receiving the ball with time and space to either shoot or thread the final pass.
So we have the theoretical setups, but what happens when these two methodologies physically collide? Because the data reveals a stark contrast in application.
Oh, the numbers are fascinating.
Yeah, attack versus defense. Egypt generated 5 goals in the group stage to secure their progression, relying heavily on a core starting XI. They've only used 17 players across the entire tournament.
Right.
Meanwhile, Australia, despite relying on those 17 debutants, has rotated heavily, deploying 24 different players to keep legs fresh.
And the collision of these two styles creates a fascinating tactical paradox. Both squads, fundamentally, are built to exploit transition. They both want to hit on the counterattack.
Right.
But in a knockout match, someone is forced to take the initiative. What's fascinating here is that Egypt will likely be forced to dominate the ball.
So it's like a high-stakes staring contest. The first team to blink and commit too many men forward gets hit on the break.
Exactly. And given Egypt's historic momentum, their attacking output in the groups, and the sheer gravity of their offensive stars, they're going to be compelled to dictate play.
Which plays right into Australia's hands.
Flawlessly into their hands.
Yeah.
Popovich wants Egypt to build out from the back. He wants Egypt to commit their fullbacks high up the pitch to support Marmoush and Salah. The more Egypt dominates possession, the more that Australian spring compresses, creating the exact spatial voids Irunkundan needs to operate on the counter.
But if Australia sits too deep in that 3-4-2-1 for too long, they risk allowing Salah to find his rhythm. I mean, Salah only needs half a yard of space in the penalty area to change the entire trajectory of the tournament.
That tension will define the match. However, all these tactical blueprints drawn up in the war room are entirely dependent on the physical availability of the personnel.
Yeah, the injury reality.
And the injury reports we are looking at are devastating for both camps. It's turning into a war of attrition.
Let's look at Australia first. They have definitively lost Matthew Leckie and Jacob Italiano. And due to tournament regulations, they cannot be replaced on the roster. Leckie provides vital veteran leadership and tactical versatility, so his absence is a severe blow to a squad heavily reliant on rookies.
Huge blow. Losing that veteran presence forces even more pressure onto the shoulders of the younger players to maintain Popovich's structure when the game state inevitably becomes chaotic.
But the true shockwave is radiating from the Egyptian medical tent.
Oh, yeah.
During their final group stage match against Iran, Mohamed Salah was substituted in the 57th minute. The cameras caught him on the bench with his leg heavily wrapped in ice, and the team doctor later confirmed a posterior muscle strain.
Which is just awful timing.
On top of that, Ahmed Fathi and Mohamed Abdelmonem are managing serious knocks. If Salah is compromised, and considering Egypt has only used 17 players so far, do they actually have the bench depth to break down Sotar in that Australian wall?
I mean, a posterior muscle strain for a player whose entire game is predicated on explosive acceleration, sharp cutting, and rapid deceleration, it's catastrophic. If Salah is operating at 70%, or if he is forced to miss the match entirely, the Egyptian tactical framework essentially collapses inward.
Because if Salah cannot exploit the space on the right, the entire left-sided overload with Marmoush becomes a dead end. Teams will just triple-team Marmoush knowing there is no threat on the opposite flank.
Exactly. And they simply do not have the bench depth to manufacture a new tactical identity on 48 hours' notice.
Huh.
Without a fully fit Salah, the attacking burden falls squarely on Omar Marmoush, which sets up the most critical one-on-one matchup of the game.
Marmoush versus Harry Sotar. Agility versus height.
Yes. Sotar is an absolute tower in the penalty area. He is structurally dominant in the air. If Egypt, lacking a central playmaker, resorts to lofting crosses into the box, it will be a wasted possession every single time.
Right, Sotar will just head it away.
Effortlessly. Marmoush has to recognize this and keep the ball pinned to the ground, utilizing rapid combinations to exploit Sotar's slower turning radius.
And if Salah does manage to take the pitch, he is going to be running into Aziz Behich. The Australian left-back brings 83 caps of international experience. He has seen every trick. He understands the dark arts of defending. And you know he will not hesitate to test Salah's injured muscle early in the match with a heavy challenge.
Oh, without a doubt.
Meanwhile, in the center of the park, Imam Mashawar will be tasked with bypassing Milas Deganek to try and link the Egyptian midfield to the attack. It is going to be brutal, localized battles all over the pitch.
It really is. And looking at the macro picture in the betting markets, the odds makers still favor the attack. Egypt is listed at plus 150, making them the favorites, with Australia sitting at plus 225. Based on the structural clash and the medical reports, the match will likely funnel into one of three distinct scenarios.
Walk us through them.
Scenario 1 is the most probable based on historical behavior. Egypt assumes the role of the protagonist, monopolizes possession, and attempts to pry open the Australian bloc, while Popovic's side stays violently compact, absorbing the pressure to launch Irankunda on the counter.
So a classic siege mentality. What happens if Egypt's injuries prevent them from being the protagonist?
That leads to Scenario 2, a grueling war of attrition. If Salah is sidelined or ineffective, Egypt loses their cutting edge. If they realize they can't break Australia down, they might pull back to protect themselves from Irankunda's pace.
Right.
If Australia refuses to abandon their defensive shape to take the game to Egypt, we are looking at a closed, gritty tactical battle that is highly likely to drag into extra time and potentially penalties.
A 120-minute chess match where one single lapse in concentration decides a nation's fate. And the third scenario.
Scenario 3 hinges on the coiled spring snapping early. If Australia secures a goal in the opening 20 minutes, perhaps from a set piece capitalizing on Sitar's height or a lightning-fast transition, Popovich will immediately instruct his team to park the bus.
Just shut it down completely.
Yep. They will drop into an impenetrable 5-4-1, choke out all the space, and frustrate Egypt into making desperate, high-risk decisions for the remaining 70 minutes.
So, what does this all mean for you as you settle in to watch? It means you have the exact tactical lens to view the subtle movements on the pitch. You are perfectly prepped for kickoff. You're looking at a masterclass in contrasting ideologies. Will Egypt's historic, emotion-fueled attacking momentum dismantle an architectural defensive wall, or will Australia's disciplined, youthful structure absorb the blows and deliver a fatal counterstrike?
It's going to be fascinating. But, when you step back and look at the broader context of this tournament, a provocative pattern emerges.
How do you mean?
Well, we're analyzing a matchup heavily defined by decimated rosters, injuries, and sheer exhaustion. Considering the unprecedented physical demands of this newly expanded 48-team World Cup format, it raises a serious question about the future of international football.
Oh, I see where you're going. Are we moving away from a tournament that crowns the most tactically gifted or technically beautiful teams?
Exactly. We may be entering an era where lifting the World Cup is less about tactical genius and entirely about which federation has the sheer squad depth to survive a month-long, brutal, physical war of attrition.
The ultimate test of endurance masquerading as a football tournament. The tactical blueprints are meticulously drawn, but once that whistle echoes through the stadium, the chaotic reality of human physical limits takes over. Before we wrap up, we want to extend one last reminder to subscribe to the channel. Help us hit that 1 million mark so we can keep bringing you these deep dives. And to our current subscribers, you are the foundation of our success and continuity. Enjoy the match, and we will see you on the next deep dive.